this one's going to be a bit of a rambling vlog. Basically, it's kind of me putting together the pieces of all the information I've taken in over the last few weeks and trying to work out how it applies to me. This one's going to be all about gender and sexuality and whether they are determined by like genetics and physical attributes, or whether it is more of a social, cultural type thing, and applying, you know, those sort of arguments to my life experience. I was raised in a feminist household, and read a lot of feminist texts growing up. Like, so when I was very young, like 12 years old or whatever, I had an adult reading level by the age of about 10 or 11. I was assessed by the government as that being the case. So I read a lot of adult reading material at a very young age, and was also always intrigued by gender and sexuality topics, because I kind of knew that I was different the whole time to, you know, the other little girls around me. Yeah, so I also grew up in Australia in the 80s. When I was growing up, was a very sexist environment, very chauvinistic, very restrictive environment as well. Yeah, so I basically, you know, read all of these texts, and I could see how society was very forcibly molding people. So in a sense, you know, I took all these experiences with me to university, where I studied sociology and women's studies. And a lot of those subjects are about how gender and sexuality are constructed. And basically I was always really against any kind of biological determinist perspective of gender or sexuality. And biological determinism basically means that girls act certain ways because they're girls, and boys act certain ways because they're boys, essentially. And I was very much against that, because I really hated the idea that any of my identity or my behaviours were determined by having ovaries instead of testicles, essentially. And also because there's a lot of horrible ideas wrapped up in biological determinism, like things like there's a guy called Pinker, who's a sociologist and writes about how rape is a naturally selected male behaviour, like a positive behaviour for the species, assisting in reproduction, which I find pretty disgusting. And you know, and then there's like the radical feminist perspective, where a lot of them believe that men are genetically, you know, like the same kind of stuff that the Pinker guy was saying, genetically dangerous, and that women needed to seclude themselves from men to be safe. And, you know, I find that, well, I didn't like it. I didn't like hearing that, you know. I still think that those extremes of that argument is wrong. But since listening to a lot of transgendered people talk about their experiences and the effects that, you know, since they started taking hormones, the effects it's had on how they feel, and all these, you know, the physical changes, it's amazing to see how much of a difference a simple hormone can make to someone. You know, the feminizing effects of estrogen and the masculinizing effects of testosterone, and hearing about someone who's a female to male transsexual talking about what he experienced after going on testosterone, and how he now understood why biological men did such terrible things sometimes because of the sex drive being so intensely increased through the presence of extra testosterone. And it made me think, because I don't have your average hormonal balance of your normal woman. I have a high degree of testosterone, and I'm also allergic to my own estrogen. And I've known this for a long time. And I've also known a lot of other things about myself, and have always felt very different from your average girl, and always gotten along better with men, and always had a rather, although I identify as a woman physically, you know, like other things like, like I was saying, I don't get along very well with other women usually. I seem to have a lot more in common with men. Wouldn't say I'm aggressive, but I tend to have that sort of competitive sort of streak, you know, that sort of fire in the belly sort of thing, that guys tend to have as well. It's very hard to express, but I've been like that since I was a very small child, you know, and there have only been certain periods in my life, like one very strong period, where I felt actually feminine. It was amazing. I felt like a completely different person, and there must have been some kind of hormonal flux, I'm assuming, that occurred at this time. You know, and I found myself attracted to lacy clothing, and found myself identifying with other women, and all of these things that I had never done before. And then at a certain point, click, straight back out of it again. And basically, I'm at a point where I internally feel very androgynous. I don't feel feminine at all. Really. Not any more feminine than I am masculine. And I'm wondering now, I have access to some treatments that could help me have a more normal hormonal balance, and I'm kind of tied between thinking, well, does this actually have such a big effect? And I feel really stupid in the sense for not acknowledging that it would have an effect on my gender identity and my sexuality as well, being that I am bisexual. I feel kind of stupid for not seeing that straight off the bat. I guess I was kind of in denial because I really didn't want to acknowledge any level of biological determinism, like none at all, which is kind of stupid really, because there must be differences. You know, they do detect differences in the brain and things like that. So now I'm at this point where I'm sort of thinking, I don't know, I kind of want opinions on what people think about how much my hormonal imbalances, how much of effect they could be having on the way I think and my behaviours. And also, I think maybe for health reasons, maybe I should get my hormonal disturbances sorted out. But in another sense, I really like who I am. I like having that sort of, I feel like it's a kind of a versatility. And now that I've kind of accepted myself for who I am, and just, you know, really realized that I'm never going to be this princess, you know, that some other people are, and liking the fact that I'm not, and I'm, you know, identifying with myself, I kind of wonder whether I should do anything about it. I'm kind of scared of fixing my hormonal problems and turning into another person. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, but is that the case? Do you see what I mean? So I really want I know it's a really complex issue, but what I really want is some feedback from people from all different perspectives on how much they think gender identity is nature, how much they think it is nurture, how much of an impact they think my hormonal issues would have on that, and whether or not they think if they were in my position they would change or whether they would stay the same. So that would be really appreciated. Thank you very much.